I'd like to welcome y'all to Secrets from the South. I'm your friend Scotty Ray, along with my co-host Terry. Now, you'll quickly catch on that we don't sound like the man on the 6 o'clock news. We talk a little slower, and we've got a southern drawl. But nonetheless, we've got a great podcast lined up just for you. We'll bring you some interesting stories. They're sometimes crazy and a little unbelievable, but it would be just plain impolite not to share them. So get yourself comfortable. Find some southern charm in a glass of iced tea and enjoy. And welcome back to Secrets from the South as we begin a whole new year, 2022. But let's reflect back. Do you have any regrets? Anything that, well, you might have regretted from 2021? I hope you'll enjoy this week's episode titled Regrets. As a new year rolls in, a lot of people make New Year's resolutions. And it causes you to look back and go, I wish I hadn't have done that last year. But I'm going to be better this year. I'm not going to do the same thing again.
Oh, I think we all do that.
So you've had some regrets, I guess, in life.
Who hasn't? I mean, I probably have a ton of regrets. I think you regret certain things and how you handled something. If you look back on it and go,
maybe you popped off a little too quick.
I wish I wouldn't have said the things that I said or reacted the way that I did. I guess that's life. I guess the cool thing is if you take that and you actually do something with it. That was a bad situation. I can't change it, but what I can change is to keep from having that reoccur.
And I'm sure there's a lot of people that say, well, I wish I'd have stayed somewhere just a few more minutes and spent a little bit more time with somebody I didn't know that was the last time I'd ever get to see them.
Well, when you say that, what's that old saying? How many people are going to look back and go, I wish I spent more time at work?
Yeah.
I tell you, a regret is, I think that a regret, just as a society, not necessarily myself, is that we've come too dependent on this little thing we walk around with in our hand. You know what I'm talking about, Scotty?
You're talking about the cell phone?
The cell phone. And I always say that from the standpoint is there's a ton of good things that we get from it, but I think it causes disconnects within a family.
It does.
I mean, I look up, take for instance, we're watching a movie last night. Now, my daughter is home for a short period of time. She got out for Christmas holidays and immediately went to California with the boyfriend, and his family had a phenomenal time. But she's here for a short period of time, and then she's back in school. And I'm just sitting there looking, and we're watching a movie, and both of them are on their cell phone. Now, granted, we're not talking during the movie, but I think that's what you see everywhere. So I would say that's kind of a regret, is that we've become too dependent on it instead of just putting it down and having good old-fashioned conversation.
And that's across the board. A lot of people send a text now instead of calling to say I love you. It's just a text. And you can't get the emotion out of a text that you can on a phone call.
Or just handwriting.
Can't even do cursive anymore. That's outlawed now. You can't do that.
I know, that's so bizarre. But I mean, recently I have been writing someone, and that's stopped because they're
getting out of jail.
Yeah, exactly. But you read right into that. But it was almost like a pastime. Seriously, Scotty, picking up a pen and a piece of paper and writing a letter to someone and mailing it. But I guess when it comes to regrets, me personally, I mean, I could look back on certain situations in terms of how I've handled things, and I think that every one of those are regrets. I think just being young, I mean, you have to realize, when I was growing up, I was this tall, skinny beanpole, okay? Mm-hmm. Nothing attractive about that. But I think just being comfortable in my own skin, I would say earlier, and not sweating the small stuff, it's really kind of a lesson learned, and I try to pass it on to my daughter.
Kind of like saying be happy with who you are.
Yeah, and be confident in who you are. It took me a long time to get from this probably little introvert kid to the extrovert that I am now. And am I perfect? No. But I think I've learned to accept the imperfections that we all have. Mm-hmm. I mean, take for an example, Courtney Cox. One of her regrets that she posted was that who is, and you know who Courtney Cox is, who played in Friends for a long time, who is a beautiful woman, but yet she felt like she needed to undergo plastic surgery. And don't get me wrong, I'm at the age right now where I'm there. If I wanted to have plastic surgery, I wouldn't dare, hopefully, have any regrets about doing it. But what she was saying, it was the amount of plastic surgery that she had, that she said she finally looked in the mirror and it was almost like she didn't recognize who she was seeing. And that's a hard thing for a female, to get older and to be accepting of what you've turned into. Because believe me, and again, I'm talking about regrets in terms of being comfortable in your own skin. But I'm saying that to our audience that's a lot younger is, yeah, we're going to all have imperfections. I think we look at magazines and we look at famous people and we think that we should be
perfect like they are.
But the truth of the matter is, here's a celebrity that's saying that they weren't even comfortable in their own skin. And that's a regret that I have, is that we put too much pressure on ourselves to be perfect. And let me tell you right now, none of us are.
Didn't I see an article not long ago, and it follows the same line? Jamie Lee Curtis, didn't she do an interview here recently that said, don't do this plastic surgery, be happy with who you are. You'll regret it later in life.
Now, I got to tell you, Jane Fonda looks like she's, I'm just assuming, had some, and I think she's even gone as far as admitting that she has. That woman looks darn good. She's in her 80s.
Dolly, look at that.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not knocking it. I'm probably going to be in line for some plastic surgery, but I got to tell you, I'm telling you as a kid to be happy, because I keep thinking about, man, would that have given me a lot more self-confidence? Don't get me wrong, I learned to overcome that pretty quickly, but there were years of just looking at this little scrawny kid, and so, I think I just kind of overcompensated that with personality or whatever, but
I get what you mean.
But I still think that I kind of stood in the shadows some, because I felt like there was nothing attractive about me. And like I said, I think that took time. But I got to tell you, for somebody like Jane Fonda, she looks really good.
I ain't calling names or anything, but I highly suggest, if you're thinking about having surgery, not to use the guy that Kenny Rogers used. Because the man couldn't smile. He couldn't move.
But there are a lot of other people out there that truly do have regret. So I told you one of mine. What's one of yours?
Well, there's two things that come to mind. And I want to say this because this is not a regret. I started losing my hair when I was young, 21. And by the time I was 23, it was pretty obvious. But a lot of thought, well, he wears a cowboy hat because that's what it is. No, I started wearing cowboy hat when I was about 12, 14 years old because my hero, Matt Dillon, wore them. And that's why I wear cowboy hats. That made an impact on me. The good guy thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's not why. The thing
and then that's also kind of turned into your brand.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
The thing that I regret, and let me explain this, because it's a twofold. I would not change where I am in life one iota. I would change how I got to where I am. I would not change every job that I've ever had because it was for a reason. But I regret at 20, I don't know, I guess it's 19 or 20, somewhere along there, I dropped out of college and I went on to work. And I lived a life at each job I went to as somebody with a college degree that didn't know what they were talking about. I knew more than them.
Because you had a lot real life experiences.
Yeah, and they were telling me what to do, and they had just gotten out of college, and you either had to eat it or lose your job. And that's what I got told a lot. Because I dropped out of college, I had people over me through the years that did not know what they were doing and forcing me to do things that I didn't believe in because I had to have a job. And I regret dropping out of college for that reason. Now, I would end up right where I'm sitting today, even with that college education. It wouldn't change who I am or what I've done. It would just make that ride a little bit better.
And I do think that elevates you in your career. But what we're finding is, believe it or not, and this is kind of off subject a little bit, but I think it's worth mentioning, is that now in today's world, with what we're seeing with the staffing shortages, and I think we've kind of evolved in this even before, so is you're looking more at experience with what you had than you are necessarily that 4-year college degree.
And even a trade, you can make a great living at a trade. You just got to put effort. No matter what you do for a living, be good at what you do. It doesn't have to be some showbiz thing from Hollywood to be happy. Do what you do and just do that one job good.
I think when we're talking about regrets, I'll have to say this. Now, I can't regret all the fun that I had in college because I had a ton of it. But I do regret
not showing up to class.
Actually, I think I did. I just don't think that I applied myself to the full capability until I took college courses at a later time in my life when I had matured.
Yeah.
And I know that when I look back on that, that is a regret of what I just coasted by in college versus when I took those college courses later and the difference in how the work ethic that I had when I was taking those courses and really the results. I coasted in college. Now, I had a ton of fun, but I think that's a regret because I know that what I was capable of and what I actually did were two totally different things. And how I wound up with a child, and think about your children, that is so focused on school, I could not be more proud. That was not me. If I'm being honest, I was more about the social aspect than I wanted the degree, but I just wanted it to come easy. And they're not going to give you that.
Look back at that and go, when I started having to pay for it, my whole attitude about college.
It does.
Yeah, when you pay for it yourself and your parents don't.
But I feel bad that I had my parents. They were not taking out a school loan. I didn't have a lot of scholarship money my way. So my parents had, at one point, 2 kids in a D1 school and paying for it. And and I just look back and think, I could have done a ton better. I did just enough to get by. And I got really lucky that I wound up getting a job where I did. And it was with a major Fortune, really 200 company. And so I have no regrets on my career and how I really was very fortunate, probably the GPA that I had. But, it was, I would say, probably a high C GPA, which is nothing to brag about. But I would say career-wise, I've been very, very fortunate with the exception of a little hiccup that I had.
But, you also got to look at this, Terry. If you hadn't done things like that, it shapes you who you are later in life. And having that little bit of fun and not giving a hoot about school sometimes shapes you into the person that you are later. And you get something more out of it than just book learning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that sometimes we take life too seriously. And don't have a regret of everything has got to be so. I know that I've heard this saying before that you don't have to go around life thinking that it's got to be an A+.
That's right. You don't.
Sometimes it's going to be a C. And let me tell you, sometimes it needs to be a C because you're not so stressed out. It is what it is. And I think at the end of the day, when you look back on things, what are the things that you truly needed to focus on? And those were the things that you need to really be worried about. And the rest of it is, what do we say? Don't sweat the small stuff.
Right.
So I think that if that's anything that we can pass on, don't regret those decisions where you focus too much attention on something that at the end of the day didn't matter.
Yeah, that advanced science class I took, I got a D in. Yeah, I ain't thought about it since. Whew, I was just happy to get out of it.
But there are other things that celebrities, we always we talk about that celebrities are the perfect people. Well, they're not. And sometimes we do things that we probably regret. Didn't we have one that we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, you and I were sitting there talking about Rod Stewart. I bet if Rod could go back a couple years and erase that little incident that he had at that New Year's Eve party, he would. What was it, 20, New Year's Eve? He goes in, him and his son and his family are waiting to be seated somewhere, and they want to sit a particular place. And I may not have all the facts just right, but basically they wanted to sit somewhere where they couldn't. And the security guard told them to go away. They were too loud. And so Rod Stewart's son gets up in the security guard's face, and somehow or another, one of them gets pushed. And Rod Stewart just hauls back and knocks the security guard down with a punch. Guess what's going to happen?
He gets arrested?
Lawsuit. Whole 9 yards. They got nasty.
They saw dollar signs?
Yep. And this drug on for nearly 2 years. And finally, it was settled outside of court. And everything went away, but Rod had to pay. And I thought I knew the figure, but I can't find it anywhere. But I'm sure if Rod had that to do over, he'd just walk away and go to the bathroom at this point and mumble under his breath.
You know, and
it
they're
wasn't worth it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's just where sometimes in the heat of the moment we get, but with you being a celebrity, you're in the spotlight 24/7.
Yeah, anything
that you do, Scotty, or I do, for the most part, is only going to impact those that were witness to it.
Correct.
But if you are a celebrity, I mean, you're in the spotlight 24/7. So you haul off and you get in a heated moment and you say something that you shouldn't be saying. It's all over the news.
That old Baldwin guy that's been in the incident with the gun.
Yeah,
Is it Alec?
Alec Baldwin.
Think of the many, many times he has made the press with his rudeness. I just don't like that guy because he's just rude to people.
But the key to it is does he actually regret that?
Probably. If him, I'm going to go out on a limb and say no. That just seems to be his personality. I don't know him personally now.
So here's something. You got a regret that Kate Winslet, now believe it or not, the movie that, I mean, she has done a ton of
She's the one that got naked on the couch and let him draw a picture of her in that movie, didn't she?
Titanic.
Yeah.
And actually she's talking about that one of her regrets was her English accent and just the whole acting aspect of Titanic. And she's, my gosh, I think she's an awesome actress. But I would have never thought that would have been a regret for her. But again, that tells you how we critique ourselves.
Yeah.
We're so hard on ourselves. And that's why I said sometimes don't sweat the small stuff. Here's another one, Scotty. Justin Timberlake. Do you remember when they did?
What group was he in? He was,
I think, in NSYNC.
Yeah, that's it.
But do you remember when they did the Super Bowl thing? Because, I mean, that's coming up.
Yeah, it is.
And he and Janet Jackson did that, and her
breastises.
Right. And he said that one of the regrets that he has, which I think is commendable for him to say this, it says that, you know, he felt bad about this, was he really let her take the whole rap for that. And he never really stepped in and said, look, I share some of the blame for that. And I think he just kind of laid low and she took the heat. And he said that's been a regret for him.
But if you go back to that year, and I don't remember what year that was, she was the most Googled item in the entire world that year.
It makes you wonder, did it actually elevate her career?
It did, and that's where I was going with that. Although he may have stepped back, in the end, although it was a bad thing at the moment, it did escalate her career. And she got something, and it was planned that way. She knew that.
And talking about regret, what if you've done the ultimate thing and, you know, like the heat of the moment, or
tell somebody what their dress looks like?
Well, no, I was actually talking about, that's where you get slapped. There's a difference there. I'm talking about, like, what if you actually injure or kill somebody?
That could happen.
Or get in a car where you know, it's New Year's Eve. You have a couple of cocktails. You think, I'm fine, I can drive home. And then, you know, the unthinkable happens.
You know, I had a police officer in with me on my morning show last week, and we were talking about safety tips. And one of the things that had happened was a guy sees somebody in his backyard. Now, this could have turned out real bad. Just see somebody walking across the backyard. Now, number one, it could be somebody lost. It could be somebody that has a mental problem or a child that's lost. And they take a gun and just start shooting at them and then call it in and goes, hey, a guy was in my backyard and I shot at him. You don't shoot at what you don't know what it is. That's a no-no. If he'd have hit them, they could have sued him for everything he was worth.
Or he could have killed him, and that would have been something he'd had to live with the rest of his life.
Yes, that's one of those things. Think before you act.
Yep. And I think we do think about, there's tons of regret that we have. And I think it's
the date you didn't go on.
Yeah. Or I think about how I acted with doozy dates. I mean, we've had some that were some real duds. I think about one time, and this is a minor regret, but this tells you just
that night you turned Mel Gibson down, that one?
Now, that would have been a major regret. But this was, I was dating the nicest guy, and I was playing in a tennis match or tournament. Played really just piss poor is the best way I can describe it. Knew I should have played better. Lost. Had a chip on my shoulder. He was there watching and really acted like a butt.
A heifer.
Yeah, to him. And he did the right thing. And guess what?
What?
Shortly after that, the little relationship that we had going came to an end. And I think that that served a purpose for me, because I'm so glad I wound up with who I wound up with. But I'm just saying, in terms of this, you get so caught up in your little world, you got to be careful about how you turn around and take that, how you feel, and you want to aim it at somebody else. You know what I'm saying?
I get that. And I think back as a kid in grade school, and I don't remember names. I can see faces in my head, but the kid that didn't have a friend or that looked down that day, you regret not taking a little time to say something to somebody to make them feel better. And that even goes into your adult life of saying something could really help somebody.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, especially like, I cannot stand to see an old person eating by themselves.
Yeah.
Now, they could have left their spouse at home. You never know. They could be traveling. They're just alone for that moment.
Is this anybody over 40? I'm just asking for a friend.
Well, I mean, that would be us, old folks. But you know what I'm talking
yes,
about.
I do.
Somebody that is definitely 70s or 80s. That just breaks my heart. But I don't know. I think that regret can be a really, really good thing if you do something to change it so it doesn't happen the next time.
And I'll close it with this. You have bound to have seen this. Regrets. And I guess this really summarizes it all. Have you seen the tattoo of the guy that wanted to have regrets put on his chest? His regrets.
Yes, I have. That is a major regret that he has. And guess what? He sees that regrets every day, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. I think Terry hit on a big topic there. We can't change the past. What's done is done. But we can learn from our mistakes. It's a new year. It's a clean slate. And we never know when our last day will be. Live each day without regrets. We hope you enjoyed our podcast and will continue to listen more. We promise to provide stories that intrigue you, provide a little humor, reflect our heritage and culture, whether it's strange and alarming. Please leave us a review and let us know how we're doing. Let us know whether you liked or disliked. Do you have a story to share? If so, we'd like to hear from you. Please email us at comments@secretsfromthesouth.com and provide a brief description of your story along with contact information, and we'll be in touch. We'd like to say thanks for dropping by. And if you don't mind, tell a friend about us. We sure hope you enjoyed this week's episode. We'll see you back next week here at Secrets from the South.